What's up everybody, Fritz here. Today we're finally reviewing the SPL Parts lower control arm and tension strut for the M235i. I'm sorry that it took so long to get to this video. It's been on the back burner for a while now, but we are finally getting into it. And I think it's important to start off this video with why I even wanted to change the control arms out in the first place. And the reason why is because I wanted to go to a square wheel setup. Specifically, I wanted to go to an 18 by 8.5 with a 35 offset and run a 245/35 tire setup. The reason why is because I don't really think a street-driven car would see all the benefits of a staggered setup or really notice the difference by going to a square setup, but my wallet would, because I would definitely be able to more evenly rotate the tires. With that being said, the 2 Series has a very small profile, so small that changing your wheel setup is a very limited process, especially for me because I wanted no spacers and no camber plates. But unfortunately, looking at Apex's website, I would need to dial in a little bit of negative camber in the front and the back. The back is no problem. Here we would need a negative 1.8 degrees of camber, and coming straight from the factory with the OEM setup, this can be achieved without any issues. But the fronts, you can't really dial in the negative 1.5 degrees that are necessary because those arms are fixed in place. Now, before we get any further into that subject, let's talk a little bit about camber for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. Camber is essentially changing the angle of the wheel with respect to the car. So normally your wheels are straight like this, so 0 camber. But when you push out the bottom of the wheel, you get negative camber. What this does is it increases your contact patch through a turn and gives you more confidence and stability while you're in that turn. Conversely, if you toe it inward like this is positive camber. This is really good if you want better straight line stability, more or less seen on off-road and agricultural vehicles. So for the rest of the video, when we mention camber, we're gonna be talking about this one, the negative camber. Now getting back into the main topic of the SPL arms. 1.5 degrees of camber is nothing crazy like you would see over at Stance Nation. So we definitely don't need camber plates for this. All that we need to do is slightly extend that lower control arm. Now I know that people most commonly go with the M control arms, but seeing that these control arms aren't meant for the 2 Series, I wasn't sure that I would be able to get in that exact fitment of camber that I would need. Not only that, because we're working with a multi-link system in the 2 Series, when we change one component of the suspension, we're actually changing something else as well, which in this case is the thrust arm. Taking into consideration all those measurements, as well as the fact that the 2 Series has a very small chassis to begin with, and that the fixed length arms might not do us justice in the end, I opted for SPL Parts because I got all the pluses of upgrading to an M control arm without all of the cons. The pluses being that I would be able to get in the necessary fitment and I would get a better bushing. The SPL Parts control arm is a solid metal bushing, also known as a monoball bushing. So considering all these factors, it might sound really complicated, but in reality, it's really simple once you take a look at it. So how about we jump underneath the car and take a look?
Oh, so now that we're underneath the car, we can actually look at the control arms and their relative position to one another so that we actually know what they do. Because we actually have 2. The first one is the lower control arm, often referred to as the wishbone. And this is the arm that most people think about when they want to change the camber or upgrade to the M control arm, or in this case, the SPL arm. What we're doing when we're adding in that additional camber is we're actually lengthening this arm. And what it does is it causes the lower portion of the wheel to kick out a little bit, and that's what gives us that camber. But when we add in that additional camber, what we're doing is we're causing this upper control arm, which is also called the tension strut or thrust arm, to pull the wheel more forward. And you can see that by its geometry. What that does is it introduces positive caster. And caster refers to the wheel's position in the wheel well. The more forward it is, the more positive caster you have. The more behind it is, the more negative caster you have. This is the reason why I went with SPL Parts, because if we add an M control arm here, this is a very specific length control arm. So if we want to go back to neutral, we have to have a very specific thrust arm. But what happens if we want better handling and we want to add in that positive caster after the suspension and wheels have settled in? Well, we're stuck because this control arm from the M Performance line is fixed. But if you change your wheel setup, or if you want to change how your suspension feels and handles in the future, you're going to need adjustable upper and lower control arms. And while we're here, we might as well talk about how camber and caster affect the wheel while we're looking at a wheel instead of these control arms. So let me get out from underneath the car and we're gonna go over it. Now let's first look at camber. This does have a little bit of performance benefits, but for those of you who are daily driving your car, when the car is elevated a little bit and you're turning, you're just gonna have even tire wear. So it does have a cost saving benefit to it as well. Once we lengthen the lower control arm to introduce that positive camber, the upper control arm or thrust arm will pull the wheel forward, introducing positive caster. And in order to offset this, we need to lengthen the thrust arm to pull it back. And so long as you have a 18-inch wheel setup, if you do have a little bit of positive caster, you're probably gonna be okay. As far as having a tight fitment on the 2 Series, it's really about the width of the wheel and tire setup, not so much of the overall diameter. So a 19-inch wheel, you'll probably even be okay, but if you wanna go even bigger than that, then that's when I would say you have to get the thrust arm and pull the wheel back to neutral. But once your wheel and tire setup has settled in, you can go ahead at that time and introduce positive caster. And the reason why you would want to do this is because although it increases your steering effort, you are going to experience better stability at higher speeds and better control as you're going in and out of a turn. All this talking is probably really boring, so how about we take the car out for a test drive and see what all these individual components add up to and what you can experience when you're actually driving on the road.
Now, once both control arms are in, you'll notice a stiffer steering experience, probably a 10 to 20% increase. Nothing too crazy like the good old days of hydraulic steering, but noticeable nonetheless. And another thing that you'll notice right off the bat is when you're driving down the road, the bump steer is virtually gone. And if you don't know what bump steer is, it's when you're driving and you take a huge enough bump, like a pothole for example, and the steering wheel will shift dramatically left to right. It's usually very transient, but it can be scary because the steering wheel is moving in a direction that you did not intend it to. And so long as your hand's on the wheel, you can correct this. But in most cases, it fixes itself because of the power steering. And as I said before, it usually lasts half a second. So the car does not really react to what the steering wheel just did. It's usually just a scary thing that, if left uncorrected because the powering steering can't do it, can become a problem. That is pretty much all gone. And for those of you who know what bump steer is, you're probably saying that bump steer can be mostly corrected through the tie rod end. And you're absolutely correct when you're looking at these components individually. But considering that they are working all together and terminate at about the same point to control the position of the wheel, we have to factor in that upgrading 2 out of the 3 arms that control the angle and position of the wheel is going to do a majority of the work and can make up for any slop that's left in the tie rod. Unless you live in an area where the road conditions are the worst, you have the hugest potholes, there's no reason to upgrade the tie rod end until you need to. Say for example, the ball joint becomes very loose and you can actually move the position of the wheel while it's still on the car. That would be an indication that you do need to upgrade the tie rod end. But if yours is holding up just fine, just go ahead and do these 2 arms first and wait for the tie rod to go bad. And just to summarize this video and the question of should you upgrade your control arms and thrust arms to the SPL version, I would say yes. This is, to me at least, a completely worthwhile upgrade. Even if you're not upgrading your wheel setup or trying to get in a specific fitment and adjust the camber, your steering responsiveness is dramatically improved. Yes, we do have to put in a little bit more effort when it comes to steering, but there is a lot of slop in the steering wheel that's taken out when you do these arms. There is quite a bit of play in the steering wheel when you move it left to right before the car actually reacts, and upgrading these control arms helps out a ton with that. The other thing that I'm taking into consideration here is that these arms are adjustable, so as your skills grow, you can adjust the fitment to match your driving preferences. Or if you try to match it up with another wheel setup, you can change it as well. If you go with something like the M control arm upgrade, then the position that it's at is set, it's fixed in place. But of course, if you want something that's more plug and play and a little bit more comfortable, then by all means, go ahead and go with it. but you are getting a rubber bushing here. So you are going to have to service this control arm at some point. Whereas you have an all metal ball joint with a Teflon coating on it, it's gonna require minimal servicing, if any at all. So if you don't mind the extra steering effort and the little bit, and I mean a little bit, of extra vibration that comes through the steering wheel when you're actually making a maneuver, not straight lining it, then it's SPL all the way. And shout out to my boys over at SE Bimmer who actually did this install for me, because I would have needed to get an alignment anyways. Anytime you're changing the geometry of the car, you're gonna wanna get an alignment. And come to think of it, nobody's claimed the giveaway for that. So SV Bimmer and I partnered up and we're doing a free alignment giveaway for anybody who's getting the control arm upgrade in their cars. So if you're in the Bay Area and you're going to get these control arms from SV Bimmer, we're gonna throw in a free alignment giveaway. So it's been going on for quite a while now. I actually forgot about it. So let's just say first come, first serve at this point. If you're in the Bay Area and you buy the SPL or M control arms from SV Bimmer, you're gonna get a free alignment. So all that you have to do is just buy the control arms from the SV Bimmer website, message me on Instagram at VroomTuber, and we'll set it up. And then once the winner is picked, I'm going to leave it somewhere in the description, or I'll pin it as the first comment. That way you guys know that we've given it away already. And if you have any other questions at all, maybe I missed something in this review of the control arms and end links from SPL Parts, please leave those questions down in the comment section below. And all the links to the control arms, thrust arms, even the M control arms are gonna be in the description. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future review videos. And I'll see all of you guys in the next one.